In the first 10 years of this century, we have had three major crashes. In 2000 was the dot-com crash, followed by the 2006 real estate subprime crash, and then 2008, the banking crash. The question is this next? This is the giant crash of 1929. Every time I listen to those guys on CNBC, I call it bubble. They keep talking about the giant crash of 1929. I tell you what, let me compare to this one coming. So what's happening in America today, savers are losing. Most parents say to the kids, go to school and save money and work hard. But in 1970, when I graduated school, $1 million at 15% interest earned me $150,000. Now, you could live on $150,000 a year back then. But in 2016, due to this thing called quantitative easing, I call it the Greenspan put. It's $1 million at negative 5 basis points. It's going to cost $1 million to save $1 million. That is how deteriorated our financials have become. And this is one of the causes between the gap in the rich and the poor. The other thing is that fewer and fewer families are receiving middle-class incomes. It's going down. Every time we shop at Walmart, we ship dollars and jobs over to China and Pakistan and all this capital. Another thing that's happening when people's incomes go down, they become dependent. Now, the U.S. government tells us that poverty has been beaten in America. Maybe poverty has been beaten, but what has increased is entitlement mentality. The attitude that the government and other people should take care of. As I said, it's a moral crisis as well as a spiritual. I learned in Sundays, give and you shall receive. And too many people today think that. Marx had one thing, he said, it was the abolition of private property. In other words, we could own nothing. So they wanted to take all of our private property and it would then go to the state. And that's why when you study communism and Marxism, it's a centralized economy. It's called, in military terms, it's called command and control. I went to military. So it's a command and control economy where the government tells you everything. And so that's why the Federal Reserve Bank is part of communism. It's a central bank. And the central bank is not American. It's not a bank. And there's no reserves in it. And it's the Fed today, in 2021, is the third central bank. And for history, since Jefferson and those guys, they kept saying we cannot have central banks. But because our academic system is basically Marxist, most school teachers are Marxists, they just don't know it. August 15, 1971, we broke the agreement of the Bretton Woods Agreement in 1944. We promised the world the dollar would be backed by gold. Going back in time to 1933, it was FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who everybody loves. The guy was a hardcore Marxist. He made owning gold illegal. And so 1933, 1944, you got to study history, Bretton Woods, 71, Nixon screws the world. But this is the thing that happened that really screwed my generation of boomers. The 401k was born in 1974. So today you have my generation, the boomers, they're hanging on by a thread due to historical events coming in. So now the stock market is at an all-time high. It's nuts. And the reason it's all-time high is because our CEOs are borrowing money from the Treasury to repurchase their own stocks. So we don't have a real economy. We don't have a real stock market. And the U.S., the Fed is greatly in debt. The U.S. is greatly in debt. So your generation is far more aware. But my generation, my concern is the market is going to come down. Stock market, bond market, real estate market. And my generation is not prepared for it because they're not as turned on or aware as much of your generation is. It's such a paradox of what's going on. Yeah, but you can see it if you're aware. So the thing that happened in 74 was very, very important. Back in 1950s, when I was a real little kid, I was working with my rich dad, who was my best friend's father. He had executives in his company that played the stock market. So this is the 50s and the 60s. And my rich dad said, anybody who's in the stock market's a gambler. And so I don't do business with gamblers. And I still remember that. So when I talk, a lot of my friends are not in the stock market. So this is the point. Back in the 50s and the 60s, prior to 71, when they took the dollar off the gold standard, you could save dollars because they weren't printing it. It was backed by gold. You see, 1944 to 71, you have to look at history. But it was really smart to be a saver of dollars. It was also smart. My rich dad didn't really save money. He built projects. He built big projects. But he bought bonds. So the smart money back in the 50s and the 60s was in bonds and savings because they didn't print money. If you can get your head around that one. And so today we're printing 120 billion a month in the U.S.
Lenin said, if you want to destroy the economy, you want to destroy capitalism, debauch the currency. So in 1971, just before I went to Vietnam, Nixon took the dollar off the gold standard. But they don't teach. You see, our system is communist. And I hate to say that because I'm a Marine, went to Vietnam twice. I fought for this country, went to military school. And today they're talking about reparations. But what history doesn't tell you is that Hitler rose to power on reparations. Why don't they teach us that stuff? So that's why I learned at military school. If you study Marx, Lenin, Hitler, and Mao, you'll see it all over the school. That's what today's postmodernist education. And postmodern education actually started in 1930, when out of the Frankfurt School in Germany, they moved over to Columbia University. And Columbia University is the headquarters for Marxism. But they don't tell you. And so the Teachers College at Columbia University is where the Frankfurt School set up in 1930. Marxism. Look at Obamacare. It was Stalin who said medicine is the archstone of socialism, socialized medicine. And education fits into that same